My name is Dan Calvi, and I'm a presidential historian. I'm also a school-trained chef. So when I talk about the foods, I know how they're prepared, and I know what it's like to do a very large party. And basically how I started was when I was a very young man with dark hair. I was on my way to culinary school, and I was in my local library, and I saw this book, and it's called The First Lady's Cookbook. And always interested in American history, I picked it up, and I read it from cover to cover. And basically, it's what you see here today. There's displays of presidential china, there are recipes, and a lot of interesting stories about the presidents that you don't see in most history books. So over the years, I started collecting presidential cookbooks, and there's a lot more than people think. There's the First Lady's Cookbook, the President's Cookbook, the Virginia President's Cookbook. A lot of individual homes will produce one, like the, Benjamin Harrison or the James K. Polk. Sometimes lady societies used to put together cookbooks to raise money for their homes. The FDR's a woman wrote a cookbook. A lot of the chefs wrote cookbooks. There's actually one called the White House Cookbook, and I was so excited. The first edition, 1901. I got this book, and I was so excited about it. There's not one presidential recipe in the whole book. I don't know why they call it the White House Cookbook. But anyway, so from my recollection, and nobody even online has claimed me not, I have the largest presidential cookbook collection in the country. I also collect presidential china, obviously, and I have over 400 plates in my collection. All right, and I brought out some of the very rare ones today. Don't tell my insurance company, okay? Because this is for the church. So a lot of the things you see here today you may not even see in some museums. Now this was Thomas Jefferson. Now Thomas Jefferson was what you call a Renaissance man. He was an architect, he was an author, he was an inventor, he was a gourmand, he was a gardener. And when I say a gourmet cook is usually somebody who's not professionally trained like me but cooks well. A gourmand is like a stuffed shirt, you know, the guy who wears the ascot. He knows what wines go in what, he knows the proper accoutrements, but he loved food, Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was the first person to import a waffle maker in this country, and he was the first person to import a pasta machine. Now today you say big deal, you go to Walmart, Kmart, but back then it was like a big to-do. And I'm going to show you, in my mind, the most presidential and one of my favorite chinas. This is Andrew Jackson. Now Andrew Jackson was the first, what they call man of the people. All the presidents before him were wealthy men or educated men. Andrew Jackson was just a simple kind of guy. He was an orphan. He saw his own father murdered before him. And so he raised to be what was considered a millionaire. But when he was inaugurated, 5,000 people stormed the White House. 5,000, and they took parts of the chandelier and they cut things off the curtain and they stood on the furniture. I mean, it was a madhouse. But Andrew Jackson, to me, is a very interesting presidential figure. This was the Harrison china. This is another one. This is Mrs. Harrison's china. And she was the first lady to really establish the White House china collection. She was the one. And the reason why was, now don't fall off your seats on this one, the tradition was, up into the Harrisons, when the new china came in, they went down to the Potomac River and threw the old china in. That's exactly what it was. Whether it was Democrat to Democrat, Republican to Republican, till about 1890, that's what they did with the old presidential china. Nobody knows. That's what they did. They went, whoop. Nobody knows how it started or why it started, but up until 1890s, that's where the old china went. And there are supposedly certain parts of the Potomac today, I think for security reasons, that even divers aren't supposed to go. Whether the presidential china is there, I don't know. But we have to thank Mrs. Harrison for the first lady to go and establish the White House china collection we have today, because they went through old barrels and old attics and dug out as much as we could. And somebody mentioned President Harding earlier. Well, we'll talk about him later. He was a son of a gun. He gambled away some of the Harrison china in a poker game. Okay? So but anyway, Teddy Roosevelt, he had the 6 kids, and they were the most presidential children in the White House at any one time. They went from about 2 years to about 16. And his oldest daughter, her name was Princess Alice, and she was a little hellraiser, you know what I mean? She was a young girl, and she was doing her thing. And one day a reporter said to Teddy Roosevelt, says, "Don't you think that you should discipline or control Alice?" And Teddy Roosevelt said, I can do one of two things. I can either run this country or I can discipline Alice. And we all know what he did. He let Alice be Alice, and he took care of business with the country, right? But the kids, the boys, loved the house. When they made it their house, they used to slide down the banisters. Remember in the old movies and kids did that? You know, they would put, they had spiders and they had rabbits and they had a pony they used to take up in the elevator, you know. And they had all the little things boys do. One of their favorite jokes was they would have a frog or a snake and they'd take it and they'd put it in a man's pocket, you know, and watch him jump. Or they would take wax and they would highly wax 2 or 3 of the ballroom tile floors, and they knew which ones it was, and all night long they would watch how people would slip and slide on the ballroom, you know. And one time, before he made it to the White House, Dolly Madison, who this comes from, in my opinion, was the most experienced First Lady. And the reason why I say she was the most experienced First Lady is because not only was she First Lady for 8 years, but Thomas Jefferson's wife had died 20 years before he became president, and he didn't have a wife. And his daughter lived many miles away and was not able to always fulfill the social duties. So Dolly Madison were close friends with the Jeffersons, and for 8 years of his White House, she practiced being First Lady before she got there. Okay? It's called an official hostess, by the way. When a president is a widower or a bachelor and you have a young lady or somebody filling in, it's called the official hostess of the White House. So that's what Dolly Madison was. Now, Dolly Madison, and this is really interesting, she was very flamboyant. She was a very esoteric type of woman at her time. She wore rouge, which was not common. She wore those big bustiers, which are back in fashion now, I guess. She wore gaudy jewelry. She was raised a Quaker, which are very simple food, simple clothes, you know. But she married a man before James Madison became very, very flamboyant. Oh, Calvin Coolidge we had mentioned. He used to, they still make oyster crackers. He used to walk around with these oyster crackers in his pocket. And he had jars of jam and jelly hidden all over the White House, behind curtains and in drawers. And whenever he was hungry, he would just dip into his, and get out an oyster cracker and dip into the jam or jelly. And nobody said how he washed his hand, but that's what he was doing all day, you know? And when he left the White House, he was so cheap, he wouldn't leave until a butler went around and collected all the jars of jam and jelly. There's supposedly 12 or 13 different kinds of flavors. So he was a little, and also he was a little peculiar. For Ida Saxon McKinley. Ida Saxon McKinley, she had rheumatoid arthritis, and she also was epileptic. And we're talking before 1900 here. And it was very unusual, you know, if you were sick like that back then, you were put on the 3rd floor of your house and, you know, they slipped the food under the door. I mean, it's the truth. But President McKinley was very devoted to his wife. And when he moved into the White House, he said, may I have, may my wife be seated next to me instead of on the opposite end of the table, which is the custom. You know, the host and hostess sit at the opposite end of the table. And the major domo said that's also how the White House is run changes over the years too. So anyway, they said, of course, wherever you want. And he sat her next to him at the table, and he knew from her facial muscles tics were coming on when the epileptic attack would come on. He would take her dinner napkin and place it over her face. And when it was done, she would just slip it off, and she would continue right in mid-sentence where she stopped. To me, that's a very devoted man. This is a very, very rare plate, and I'll tell you why. Bring it over here, Joe. There's no maker's mark on the back, and there's no date of manufacture, so it's very hard to trace down. But it has 3 presidents on it. It has Lincoln, Garfield, and McKinley, and it says, "Our Martyrs." So we know up to Kennedy we had 3 presidents that were assassinated. But what it says on the bottom, it says, "Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, Marion Nowinski, Fine Grocers and Provisions, 220 Foster Avenue." Now, back then there were no supermarket chains. They were mom and pop supermarkets. So I hope you enjoyed everything. Thank you very much. Please enjoy our well-needed refreshments out front. And if you have any questions while I'm here.